Yeah. Bills Mafia.
So offensive line is an important issue here. The Bills decided to not do much. They like the continuity there, and to me, that might lead into running back.
Mm-hmm. And, now we're leading into the next part of the show here. A little play on words as a segue. Not a bad idea, We got Mark Schofield here, USA Today. He's been doing great work covering quarterbacks in the NFL for a very long time, and it was great to get his opinion on Josh Allen before last year. Mark, busy time of the year for all of us, so thanks for being here. How's your offseason going?
I cannot wait until Saturday, a couple of weeks from now, when this is over. Although I fear, as you guys both know, that night we will start yelling about Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell, and it will just continue for another year. But I'm glad that the draft is almost here. I do love this time of year. It's a busy time of year, but it's one of those times of year where teams can't hide. They can't sort of hide behind mealy mouth. I got to go look at the film to give you an answer to that. It's like that. They've got to make picks. They've got to make decisions about their team, their roster. And it's a great time of year to get a sense of how the teams actually feel about a position group, one side of the ball versus the other, a player or, a couple of players on their team. So it's a great time of year to get that sort of insight on these organizations.
And speaking of that insight, that's why you're here, is to give us that insight about the Patriots. So how do you grade what they've done in the offseason so far? Because I feel like if you were to have like a humdinger factor, moves that make you just go, the Patriots have had the most of those this offseason.
I mean, I feel like they made all of them. I mean, I feel like all of the humdinger moves were like, and I will say the Jonnu Smith move comes down, and then the next day, I thought I was getting chapsed. Okay. I legitimately thought with that Hunter Henry move, somebody was fooling around with me. I didn't believe it. Like I thought, no, they're not going to sign both tight ends, but that's what they did. Nelson Agholor, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Mills was another where I thought I was getting chaps because I'm like, this doesn't make sense at all. They had money to spend. They spent it. They had needs to fill. They tried to fill them. I mean, I think most, in terms of like putting grades on moves and things like that, it's all incomplete, right? Like we don't know exactly how it's all going to come together, particularly for New England, because let's face it, we can be honest here. The main move is the one that might determine whether these all work out or not. And that's the quarterback position. Until they figure that part of it out, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Agholor, Bourne, it might not matter if the guy that's throwing the football can't get them the ball. And so we wait and see what the approach is at that position via the draft, whether it's, trying to go up to get somebody, whether it's taking a flyer on somebody on day two, whether it's just saying, look, we're going to see what we've got from Cam and we'll reevaluate it next year. That part remains to be seen. I think in terms of trying to look at each one in a vacuum, I like Smith. I like Henry. I liked those moves. Agholor is a bit more of a question mark. Same with him with Bourne. I do think that, look, they're great at getting slot receiver type guys. It's that sort of X type, bigger bodied guy that can go get it, guy that can go downfield. That's the piece that's still missing to this roster. And, maybe it's something they try to address in the draft. Although, look, the guy they tried to address it with the last time to kill Harry,
he's gone.
He's the reason why they're trying to have to address it now. So,
yeah.
So a lot of it remains to be seen, particularly with respect to that quarterback position. But what at the end of the day, you feel like you're getting chapsed and you have to double check the accounts when they're making moves, might tell you a little bit something about the moves that they made.
Mm-hmm. And so, you touched on a few things there, and I want to get to quarterback and wide receiver here. Just ask it simply, what would you do?
I mean, if it were me, I'm trying to be aggressive to go get a guy.
Yeah.
With the money that you've spent, you've tried to address a lot of needs. The big one is quarterback. And I think you've got to be aggressive at this point in time. If we do see somehow, Lawrence, Wilson, Mac Jones, I think you call Atlanta and you offer them everything up to and including Maine and New England and Maine and Rhode Island like to go get to 4 to get Justin
It's a lot of
Fields.
lobster.
I mean, lobster rolls, like Providence is a lovely town. TF Green's a very nice airport. It's close to Gillette Stadium. Many teams fly into TF Green.
Stay at Martha's Vineyard or something.
Yeah, I mean, Nantucket, like whatever it takes to go get to 4. I think you've got to be aggressive. What's interesting about this discussion is that a lot of people have said, look, Belichick's not like that. Like they grade players the way they grade them. And if a player isn't graded a top 5 pick, they're not going to go up and get that person in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But 5 weeks ago, you would have said that Bill Belichick doesn't spend money in free agency. And a lot of people thought, even with their cap space guys, that they wouldn't spend it because that's not what they do. They went out and spent it. It's clear that they're going to be aggressive this offseason because whether it's watching Brady win a ring, whether it's finishing 7-9, whether it's a combination of the two, who knows? They're doing things differently this offseason. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think the old adage of Belichick is going to trade out of 15 and trade back down is applicable this season. I think they're going to try to be aggressive. That's what I would do. My idea here would be you've filled in most other things. Quarterback is a huge question mark. And let's say, hypothetically speaking, Cam figures it out and he's suddenly – I don't think you're getting 2015 Cam, but he's like 2017 Cam, which is still a good quarterback, got Carolina to the playoffs. He's on a 1-year deal, so you're either going to have to pay him next year or you're right back where you were right now trying to figure out quarterback. Why not be aggressive, go get a guy? And if Cam hits, great. The guy doesn't have to play right away. So if it's Trey Lance or Justin Fields or whomever, you don't have to force him onto the field. But you've now got yourself a guy that can step in next year. It's sort of a Mahomes type situation. Or if Cam doesn't work out, you've now got a guy that you can play. So I think they've got to be aggressive. That's what I would do. It's time to go get a guy. Like you've tried to address everything else. What's the point of adding Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Nelson Agholor, and then saying, well, we'll see if Cam figures it out. And if not, we'll draft Davis Mills at 46. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. Go be aggressive. Go get the guy. Having said that, they'll trade out of 15 and draft a safety in the second round. I'm prepared for that too.
Yeah, it's safe in the second round again. It's the only Bill Belichick had ever scouted specifically, after last draft. With wide receiver, I thought I saw something the other day. It could have just been one of those like clickbaity Instagram posts, but there might have been something coming out about Julian Edelman. Am I right?
There's concerns about his knee. Yeah, there are concerns about his knee and whether he'll be able to go, whether he can give it a full season, whether he might need more time, whether he'll be ready. I mean, it's hard to say this as a Patriots fan that, look, Julian Edelman has been a great player, but he's older than Wes Welker was when Welker sort of went south. We have this discussion a lot, running back value. And I know running back is a hot topic in Buffalo, what you guys are going to do at the end of the first round. And look, if Najee Harris, Travis Etienne are there, I mean, that's tough value to pass up. But running back is part of the reason it gets devalued is because of the wear and tear on these guys, right? The miles, 2 seasons of running back in the SEC is like, it's like dog years in a sense. It's the same thing with slot receiver in the Patriots offense because you do so much over the middle. You're doing these routes where you're running yourself into and out of linebacker territory, which when you're 5'9", 185, like those hits add up. You see some of the hits that he's taken over the years. It's a wear and tear position, just like running back, that slot receiver position in New England's offense. And so I think there has to be this idea that prepare for Edelman's eventual departure, whether it's retirement, moving on, trading him, whatever. So I do think that a guy like Bourne is sort of viewed as a potential like shifty slot type guy. See what they can get out of him. I wouldn't surprise me if they double dip a receiver in this draft, maybe a more X type early, like at 46, maybe a DME Brown and Nico Collins. And then a little bit later, a Dwayne Eskridge at 96, Cade Johnson even later in the draft, the South Dakota State slot receiver. But I do think there's an idea that, look, whatever you get from Edelman from here on out might be icing on the cake, but you have to be ready for life post-Julian.
And so would it shock you if they went wide receiver first round?
It wouldn't shock me. Look, if they try to get up, if they try to get to 4, to Detroit at 7, Carolina at 8, and it just doesn't work, and then you sort of get frozen out of that quarterback conversation, that might mean that we've got 5 QBs in the top 14 picks, which means a guy like, Jalen Waddle might be at 15. a Devonta Smith might somehow fall to 15, or even if those guys are gone, Rashad Bateman at 15 is something to keep in mind. Now, he's oddly gone from 6'3" as a recruit when he was, being scouted by rivals to then like 6'2" in the program to now 6, and 5/8. So it is a curious case of shrinking Rashad Bateman, but I still think he's my wide receiver 4. So if he's there at 15, again, my grades, who cares? But, I think he's something to consider at 15. Maybe it might be too early in Terrace Marshall, the LSU receiver, but he's got a nice sort of, projection there. So maybe, or if they do somehow trade back a couple of spots, like say Washington sees Christian Darrisaw there at 15 and they're like, look, we got to go get a tackle. Maybe they come back to 19 and one of these receivers is there. Maybe they go the shifty slot guy in the first round, Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney. Those could be potential spots for them too. I know most Patriots fans are thinking, oh my God, a first round wide receiver again, like they're going to screw it up again. Look, they haven't got receiver right. Look, we all saw that same graphic, right? They've missed on a lot of receiver picks over the years. But that's a reason why they got to figure it out too. So, it wouldn't surprise me if they miss out on QB, they go receiver at 15 or some point early in this draft.
Yeah, we were talking about like sunk cost fallacies and everything. When we talk about, taking running backs on day 3 for the Bills or signing like veteran cornerbacks in free agency, when you take economics at any level, one of the first things you learn is that sunk costs are a terrible reason to not do something.
Right.
So if you find the value there, go ahead.
And that's kind of like what they did with the tight ends, right? A lot of people said, how could you sign 2 tight ends? You just drafted 2 tight ends. Well, do you really think these guys are going to contribute to the level that Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith might? Like, just because you've done that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to get better at a position. And that's something that I think the Patriots have traditionally done, which is try to move on from mistakes quicker. And N'Keal Harry might be the next example of that. Like, look, we got the evaluation and the pick wrong. Like, why keep running him out there on the field if it's not going to come together for us, for him? Like, let's just try to get like a 6th round pick from somebody in exchange for it, and we'll try to readdress the position in this draft.
And so, last year, Cam Newton didn't work out as planned, maybe, probably. It was the 7-9 year. That's a lot worse than what Patriots fans expected, because we want to kind of get like a fan idea of, the fan. I think perspectives on it are kind of all over the place, guys. I remember, I probably said it to you guys. I've said it on other shows too before that season started. I'm like, look, you look at this schedule, you look at this roster. Belichick could do his best job as an NFL head coach, and this team might go like 9-7, and they went 7-9. Like, it was a tough schedule, tough sets of circumstances. The COVID thing with Cam Newton, he signed late and all that stuff. So there are reasons why, but again, the roster wasn't great. The wide receiver position, the tight end position, the questions about Cam, there are obvious issues that this team has to sort out. And so I think many people are like, okay, well, we expected kind of a down year. And, there were moments, they beat Baltimore and you start to talk yourself into it. They blow out the Chargers. You start to talk yourself into it again. But then they get blown up by the Niners. They get blown up by the Rams. And it's clear that this wasn't a team that was going to be competitive in the East, let alone the AFC. I think the expectations are different now. There's a bit more of, okay, they're starting to throw money at this. Like, I don't think there's what I would say patience. I think there better be some results this year. And the other thing to keep in mind for, Bills fans that are enjoying sort of sitting back and watching what's happening in New England, the discussion over Bill Belichick, the general manager, has always been simmering under the surface in New England. It's now right at the forefront, especially with these expenditures in free agency, the N'Keal Harry thing, the questions about how they handle quarterback. Bill Belichick, the general manager, I don't want to say is on thin ice, but it's a bit shaky under him right now. Bill Belichick, the head coach, obviously that's a different story. He's a tremendous head coach, but it's the personnel roster construction side that people are a bit more, shall we say, impatient with.
As rightfully. Rightfully so.
Yeah, Kevin, it's exactly right. Like, two things we've learned over the past year. Tom Brady papers over all manners of roster construction sin, and Bill Belichick and coach his way out of a paper bag. Like, we've learned those things. This was a bad roster that he still got to 7-9 and won some impressive games with. But, they don't have Tom Brady now. where you can rely on former quarterbacks from Kent State becoming dominant slot receivers because Tom Brady's going to read defenses and carve them up with his mind. Like,
don't do the Mac like that, Mark. Don't you do the Mac like that?
I mean, I'm ready to go to mattresses for some of the guys in the Mac in the draft here. So, I mean, come on. But, you know, that's just it, though. I mean, now you need it's sort of the young quarterback, rookie quarterback model, right? Like, for so long, they had Tom Brady, the guy that, you know, made everybody around him better. But now they're at the point where they have to figure out quarterback, kind of like having a rookie quarterback situation. So they need the talent around them. And because of all these misses at wide receiver, at tight end, at other positions, they don't have it. So they're forced to spend money and hope they can fill in the quarterback piece over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we had you on the show in December, week 16, when the Bills played really well in that one.
Yeah.
You
played pretty well in that one.
I didn't expect it. I honestly thought that was potentially that in the next week in Miami, where two games are like, yeah, well, we'll limp into the playoffs, means nothing. But they went on a high note and continued that through the playoffs. But you mentioned to us on the show that I think this is it for Cam Newton. Like, this is it. I don't even think you should play week 16 against the Bills. Like, maybe a half. I think that was literally what you had told us. Yeah. What happened? Like, what? To me, was it McDaniel? Like, what happened that got him back on the roster? And it wasn't cheap. It wasn't a 1 year, $1.1 million deal, or whatever his vet minimum is. What happened?
I do think that they looked at the totality of the season and circumstances and thought, we'll bring him back because this is the absolute worst case scenario. You know, sided late, COVID, all of that stuff. You know, and Cam would, you know, he was out forthright with it and said, look, I wasn't quite right coming back from COVID. Like, it took me a while. So they're looking at that as like, this is absolute worst case scenario. And year two will have to be better. You know, it's just going to have to be better. Now, whether that's, you know, wishful thinking, whether there's some validity to it, whether it's somewhere in the middle, who knows? But I think that's their line of thinking, which is, if nothing else, we've got a guy that we had last year. We've got more talent around him. We can put a better system in place. And so we should be improved on the offensive side of the ball. We'd be better on the defensive side of the ball. 7-9 becomes, you know, trying to do the math, 10-7, 11-6. You know, the 17-game series is going to take some getting used to in this old brain here. But they're looking at that way, right? Yeah. And then maybe if they get the quarterback, you know, they can work that person into the lineup, or Cam, you know, does pan out, then great. Now you've got to have plans B and C behind that. And I think that's what we'll see, you know, whether it's Jarrett Stidham as plan C and rookie as plan B, Stidham as plan B, rookie as plan C, whatever. But, you know,
Jake Dolegala, practice squad, Jake
Dolegala.
I ate lunch with him in high school.
There are guys. There's Stidham Hive. There's Dolegala Hive. Like, Patriots Twitter is like, there's certainly Fields Hive, Lance Hive. Mm-hmm. There's a small Jones Hive contingent. Like, you know, there are people that are banging the table for their boys. And Jake, you know, he's got his fans. I mean, so, you know, but they have to figure it out. They have to throw resources at it and figure it out, because until then, all these additions won't add up to much.
And we've talked a lot about the offense, so we'll kind of pivot to the defense for the last 10 minutes or so that we have you. Just, you know, the story of the defense for me coming out of last offseason was the opt-outs are going to kill this unit. Is that what happened last year?
I think partly. I mean, losing Chun forced Kyle Duggar to take on an increased role as a rookie. And I think he's going to be good. Mm-hmm. And I think he's going to be versatile, box safety, high safety. I think he could do a lot of things. But it was supposed to be a year of him caddying and carrying Chun's clubs. And he had to play because Chun opted out. Losing Hightower, in addition with Van Noy being gone and others being gone at the linebacker level, like, that was huge. I mean, so getting him back is going to be big. But I also think, look, the secondary wasn't as good, right? Like, Gilmore didn't, you know, he's banged up at times. He didn't have the kind of season that he was coming off Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah. J.C. Jackson, you know, he's very good. But when you've got the ability to stay in the pocket because they couldn't get a ton of pass rush. Uche, you know, Winovich, Jennings, like, they showed flashes at times, but they couldn't get consistent pressure, which gives quarterbacks time. And when you're having to cover into, you know, 3-4 seconds into the down, even the best corners can't, you know, hold up. And so I think it was a talent drain for sure. But I also think that, you know, guys didn't perform the way they were expected to. And this was, going into last season, it was okay. Well, whether it's Stidham, whether it's Newton, like they're built to win 17-14 rock fights. Well, they weren't built to win 17-14 rock fights because they couldn't hold teams to 14 and they couldn't score 17.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we know that as well as anybody from the last meeting between them. It was one of the few games where I live with my girlfriend's family right now on Long Island. One of her cats joined me and was actively watching the Bills game. He was even really excited, just sitting there, pointed straight at the TV. It was a fantastic experience all around.
I mean, I started recording my post-game show midway through the second quarter because I was just like, there's no reason to watch this to the end to need to, find things to talk about. This team's not good. And so they need to figure stuff out in a quick way. And maybe they've started to do that. Maybe they haven't. We'll see.
And, you mentioned, there's no doubt in Bill Belichick as a head coach, but there is possibly as a general manager. I doubt that the answer to this question is a yes, but I have to ask, is there a world where he takes on a lesser role and stays head coach and maybe, takes a back seat to the GM role? Or when you lose him for one, you lose him? I think it's you lose them for one, you lose them for both. It'd be hard to imagine Belichick just being like, you know what, I'll step back now. Now, maybe it happens. Look, we saw Elway sort of take a reduced role. Obviously, it's a bit different. He wasn't coaching, but, we've seen some people sort of take a step back. You do wonder, if they have another bad draft, if eventually Kraft steps in and says, look, we've got to rethink how we do personnel in the front office, whether it's you need a general manager under you, somebody to take that title officially, or, another, they bring Matt Patricia in and he's sort of acted as sort of a pseudo director of player development, which is a whole nother conversation if you think about it. But I can't imagine Belichick being like, I'll fully step back and relinquish personnel. He learned under Parcells. If you're gonna ask me to make dinner, let me shop for the groceries line. So it'd be tough to think Belichick would be like, yeah, I'll stop doing this bit of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that completely makes sense, and that's the answer I expected, but I did want to ask. Kevin, you looked like I cut you off there.
No. I mean, I've been jonesing to hear Mark's opinion on the running back room, just in general, and the draft with New England's room in general, and then correlated to the draft, and obviously, some Bills tied in there. What's your opinion on the room in New England and what we can see talent-wise happen late first round, early second, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot might sort of hinge on Burkhead's health and Michelle's health. I mean, Michelle has been banged up, and you start wondering about the rumors of him pre-draft with the sort of bone-on-bone discussion. That's a concern. Burkhead's recovery from the ACL injury is a concern. I do think getting James White back is important. I do think Dan Vitale potentially coming back. Now, obviously, he was signed and then opted out because of COVID, but he could be that fullback that they've truly missed since James Devlin's retirement. And now, obviously, you think the tight ends could fill some of that role as well, but I do think there are times when they want to be a I formation 21 personnel team. That fullback's a big part of that. Jakob Johnson, the international player, I think filled that role admirably. But I'm somebody that loved Dan Vitale when he was at Northwestern in their sort of super back role. So I'm excited to see him in this offense. Now, at the same time, I think this offseason is an offseason where they have to evaluate every position group. And if a player like UNC's Michael Carter, who I've said is James White 2.0, is there at 46, or even Javonte Williams, the UNC guy, I don't think he's there at 46, but if he's somehow there, I think you have to consider that because, again, the whole offense, save offensive line really is kind of up in the air. I mean, the tight end's probably figured out, but everything else you've got to address. And so I think those players are intriguing. When you start thinking about sort of the running back position in this draft, I mean, we've seen how running backs get treated, right? They've been devalued somewhat. We saw, Clyde Edwards-Helaire come off the board at the end of the first round last year. It's why we think that guys like Travis Etienne and Najee Harris might be there when the Bills are on the clock at the end of the first round. And so there's some talent that might slide down the board. Would Belichick go running back at 15? I hope not, but he might. I think they've got more pressing needs than a position that you can get production from via other factors such as the offensive line in front. You don't have to invest early. But if you're a team like, say, Buffalo, that doesn't have as many needs and you want to get more efficient running the football, and Najee Harris is staring you in the face at the end of the first round, it might be tough to pass on that. But you could also look, guys like Michael Carter, like I mentioned, Trey Sermon, even later in the draft, Khalil Herbert, the Virginia Tech running back who I like a lot, Ramondre Stevenson from Oklahoma. You can find guys on day 3 of this draft that will contribute as running backs. They might not be the talents that, say, Etienne or Harris are, but when you think about how the position is used, where the game is trending, maybe it's a better use of resources to go running back later.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, all NFL teams, it seems like it's a better use of resources to go running back later in general. It seems like, that 2017 class with Kamara, Chubb, Henry, where basically every running back that was drafted and undrafted panned out. I think that gave us a little bit of let's just draft a running back late mentality.
Yeah. And plus, the idea of, a good running back is okay, but a good running back and a great offensive line might be better. Or even an average running back and a great offensive line might be better. There's the idea that, you've got to get the offensive line room right. And so, I think we've sort of all reframed our focus on how we think about running backs. Now, there are transcendent backs that can, do what they do and deliver and produce because they could make cuts in their vision and things like that. But I still think those players might be late first round as opposed to top 5 picks when you start thinking about the value. Like, I think the days of, Saquon Barkley second overall, I think we might not see that for a while. Now, of course, we might see, Kyle Shanahan do something silly and he traded up to get Najee Harris. I don't think that's what's happening, but who knows? I'm all for chaos. Like, I saw a theory today on Twitter that he traded up for Kyle Pitts to pair Kyle Pitts
with George
Kittle, which would be pretty scary if you're a defensive coordinator. I can't imagine giving up, but maybe 2 future first rounders for Kyle Pitts if he is the unicorn that he just tweeted out that he is.
I just saw that pop up on my Twitter. It's funny that
yeah. He's it's clear that these guys, they listen to the coverage, they read the tweets. Yeah. So Kyle Pitts, he's the unicorn.
They search themselves on Twitter. It's no secret.
Do you think ETN will develop? Whoever, it doesn't matter who he plays for. I think for me, it's like if you get a primetime running back, and the Bills are in the mold of Andy Reid and what they did in Kansas City with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, it's just the Bills are in the literal same spot the Chiefs were last year, and a similar room before Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's decent. But would you sit there staring? Is ETN? I mean, the Bills don't have a receiver or a running back that can catch 100 passes. I mean, they just don't.
And he is
right.
He is. Yeah. And the other thing about him, I always love the idea of forcing a defense to declare their intentions and then exploiting what they do. Like, do you treat him like a running back or you treat him like a slot receiver? Because if you treat him like a running back, he's got the ability to run routes from the slot. Like Clemson did that with him a lot. And then when you start looking at, okay, you're spreading out the field with Josh Allen, you go 5 wide, empty with Josh Allen and his ability to run himself, that's tough to defend. Or if you do treat him like a slot receiver, do you play 3-3-5, 3-2-6 against that look because you're like you want to make sure you can cover him with a corner or a safety.
You run it.
Then you just run it. And he can run outside zone, inside zone, just some gap power stuff. I mean, look, the Bills are in a luxury spot right now where they don't have to force a need. They can draft for whether it's best player available or luxury or however you want to term it. And I think, look, ETN would be a fantastic fit in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's where we're at. What do you think of Mitchell Trubisky, real quick? You think it was a good backup signing?
Absolutely.
Where do you stand on that?
I mean, look, obviously it didn't quite work out in Chicago, and there are things that he needs to improve upon. But I do think the idea of having a backup quarterback with mobility is a smart move for a franchise because if nothing else, look, he can run around a little bit and make plays. Like, God forbid, worst case scenario, Josh Allen goes down for a quarter or a half or whatever, and you need somebody to come in and finish a game. He can run the basic part of your offense, run around, make some plays. You can use him as a runner. You can use him as an offensive weapon. And I think that makes sense. And I think, look, Brian Dable plus the work that Josh Allen himself did, which he deserves all the credit in the world for with Jordan Palmer, developed Josh Allen into the quarterback he is today, an MVP candidate type of player. Dable could perhaps do some of that with Mitchell Trubisky. I do think that getting him out from Matt Nagy, getting him into a new environment, new offense, new coaching staff, Brian Dable, I think that's a nice acquisition for the Buffalo Bills and for Trubisky himself.
Yeah, they said they picked the Bills over Carolina. If there's any credence to that, I don't know. Maybe that's what.
Carolina, he had an opportunity to perhaps try and start. I mean, now he obviously wasn't coming to Buffalo with the intentions to start with Josh Allen in place, but he wanted to go work with Brian Dable. Joe Brady might have helped him too, but you've got clear-cut developmental evidence of what Brian Dable can do for a young quarterback, and I'm sure that's attractive to Mitchell Trubisky and perhaps some other young quarterbacks out there looking at the Bills.
Yeah, well, this is about all the time we got you for today, so really appreciate you taking the time here. I had one more question. I'm going to save it for next time because it might be a question served for better after the draft.
Absolutely. Look forward to it, but thanks so much, guys. Always a blast coming on.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate having you. We look forward to recapping the draft in general with you probably in May.
Absolutely, man. Look forward to it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
And just remind our viewers where they can find your work before you leave, and then we'll cut you loose.
Will do. You can follow me on Twitter, on the Steakum app, at Mark Schofield on the Steakum app, USA Today's Touchdown Wire, Pat's Pulpit, Big Review, Bleeding Green Nation, but on Twitter at Mark Schofield.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks again. We'll talk to you real soon, okay?
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great night.
Like a high Jordan Boyer, can you catch it? Trade day is like a mask, you not catching anything. Matt Milano making plays, we not scared of any team. Best in the AFC.